Steve Hauck is in here this morning. Stephen, good morning.
Morning.
Okay, so first of all, I want your take on yesterday. I was very bothered. I don't know if you watched any TV. Just bothered by these students across the country being interviewed by CNN as if they're speaking to a 15-year-old and asking them questions as if we're talking to experts. There's one thing to say, how do you feel? I mean, how are you worried about being in school these days? How do you feel? You're going to go off to college at some point, but asking questions about gun legislation and what's the answer to fixing the school violence problem. I'm not sure I really care what a 15-year-old thinks at this point.
Well, one of the great things about youth, I guess, sometimes for all of us, is you don't have to get involved in those bigger issues. At least you shouldn't have to.
You should. I don't want them to be involved.
They're complex answers, and I think you have to live life a little bit before you have any indication of. It's easy to say, when you're young, no one should ever go hungry. I mean, it's easy to say that, but there's a lot of things that go into someone becoming, on the streets and
most times it's right back to the gun issue. It's a mental illness,
right? There's a lot of issues there. So it's certainly a utopian world to live in, and there's nothing wrong with that, and that's great. And maybe you shouldn't have to face those things. And unfortunately, some kids are dying across the country in schools. They shouldn't be. But to sort of put a microphone in their face and say, solve the world's problems.
Absolutely irresponsible, and also I felt the CNN reporter was injecting her opinion throughout the whole thing.
Yeah,
it was really tough to watch, and it was a clear example of exploitation, I thought.
Right, and that's not to say that some younger kids have ideas, because they're a little bit different than I was at that age.
They are the future. There's no doubt about it. And they spoke very eloquently. There's no doubt about it. But give me a break. I mean, this can't be solved. This is not an easy problem to solve to begin with. But to think you're going to put a mic in a kid's face and one thing to say, hey, they're marching against gun violence, which who could disagree with that?
Right.
I don't think anybody could disagree.
Yeah, there's a lot of bright minds and a lot of people that want to do the right thing that are looking at this topic. And aside from the politics and all that other sorts of things, there are people that just want to do the right thing.
All right.
Can I just interject one more thought into this? Because it's interesting, I think, the way it's being reported. You will get a different version on CNN or Fox News, or actually even, Andrew, in some of the stories you read this morning, some are saying it's a walkout to call for more gun control. Others are saying it's to remember the victims, and it's a major difference.
There were three meanings yesterday for this walkout. Meaning number one was to be in solidarity with those victims, and I'm going to tell you something. Nobody should ask any question, and I will give you this: CNN didn't seem to be interviewing as many students from Florida. From the high school where this happened. Maybe they were feeling like they'd be respectful, or maybe the school was like, "Don't come here. We're not allowing you to." I mean, they had video, but we're not allowing you to interview our students. The second reason, so there's solidarity, there's anti-gun violence. We're going to march against gun violence in our schools. I'm with you.
Yeah.
The third became gun legislation. And every question was leading, so you're going to be able to vote soon, and what are you telling your legislators? I mean, they were drawing them right into this, and I just don't think that's the argument students should be having right now. Mm-hmm. Hey, we're going to stand up in solidarity for what happened and against gun violence. I'm okay with it there, but that's not what it was. The other thing that worries me is adults have felt that there's lightning in a bottle here, certain adults with an agenda, and they're jumping on the story and making it into something that it probably wasn't intended for. Right. And anytime that happens, it's never good. You're using kids to get your message across.
Absolutely. I
don't like it.
I agree with you 100%. Yeah. And I mean, obviously it's been a pretty well discussed topic.
Sure.
The gun issue, and there is no easy answer to it. And I always hesitate to see this legislation, all of a sudden it pops up. You wonder, is somebody got this thing waiting to go, and they're waiting for an opportunity, or have they really put together some good common sense sort of legislation?
And let's remember, some of these proposals are pie in the sky that are never going to come to fruition.
Absolutely.
You have to be. It's one thing to, some politicians can be criticized for coming up with going public with something that they know full well will never go anywhere, but the public's going to jump on it, and it's going to become a good story. They're going to look like the hero. The real hero is the one that's going to be, I believe, the one that's going to be honest with you and say, that is never going to get done. It just will never happen. But we could do this. And it might not make you as happy, but we could accomplish this. To me, that's what we need in Washington right now, and in Albany as well.
For me, when I look at politics, and I don't necessarily know the particular politician's stance on things, and I'll read something, and usually the ones I say I absolutely disagree with are somebody either totally far to the left or totally far to the right.
Yeah.
Those are people I just can't get on board with their opinions because they're so jaded.
What we were talking about yesterday, and I sometimes feel that in this world I don't have anybody to represent this country. I don't have anybody to represent me anymore because it's either far left or far right, and I'm somewhere in between.
I am too.
And if you're not, you're almost considered to, well, you don't have an opinion. You don't stand up for things. No, I do stand up for things. We're both pretty opinionated people.
Absolutely.
But we find ourselves far closer to the middle than we do to the far extremes.
Yeah, I think I am very close to the middle. I lean right, I think, on certain issues. But for the most part, I think I'm right down the middle as far as a lot of topics.
This topic, I'm really interested. Of course, Steve Hauck was a lieutenant with the Utica Police Department, and now you travel all over, and you really work with police forces around the country.
Sure.
And what is in Denver? They're talking about using social media, combining social media with body cams. What do you think about this?
There's a couple of agencies that have bounced around the idea of. Have you ever seen this TV show, this live TV?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, live PD or something.
Right, something like that. So basically, they shoot police footage like cops live, unedited.
So you're watching live,
right?
Well,
live.
are you watching live?
It's live.
It is live.
In fact, they had a couple issues where they showed some things they probably shouldn't have shown, but they show it live, and they do a huge disclaimer, and they basically put it out there.
And it's on cable, so they can probably get away with it.
Right, exactly. So the idea is to show these events as they happen. In other words, it's with the exception of inside a home, because that's private, but anything that's public, so you're out in the street or you're out in a public venue, to shoot it live with body cameras. Put it out there and just let people see the real thing. So, because, and I've talked about this, and I think this plays into social media, is for law enforcement, when you've done this for a long time, it was so odd because I would put a particular incident out, and I put the information out, didn't think much of it. It's just a run-of-the-mill police encounter. Next thing I know, it's a huge story.
Right.
I'm like, geez, I didn't really think it was a big deal. So I learned then that there was basically two things. Anything to deal with kids or animals, always going to be a huge story.
Yeah.
The cow, I mean, I can't... a story like that's so small you don't think anything of it turns into a huge national story.
The baby in the street.
Whenever you deal with kids or you deal with animals, always going to be a big story. So things that I might not think are important, you might think are important.
Right.
It's not sort of your place to decide what people are going to think important. So I think the idea behind this is put out what we do on a regular basis, everything, all the stuff, the traffic tickets and the domestics and all those things. Just put it out and let people decide what's important.
It's kind of like it's already out there right now with the scanner. Oftentimes when people are listening to the scanner, believe me, this has happened more than once. I get a phone call from my mother. You just got a ticket. How would you know? How would you know that? I just heard it on the scanner. Yeah, you got a ticket.
I have a couple scanner questions, but that is
so that's
classic Keeler right there.
Believe me, twice that happened, but it's kind of already out there a little bit. But this would be video. So how do you prevent domestic violence? You don't want to show the victim. How do you prevent so you shut the camera off, or you don't broadcast it, or it gets broadcast?
Yeah, I think those are some things they've got to work out. And my concern would be if you responded to, say, a fight or a shooting or something in the street, and the crowd started to swell. Or you have other people sitting at home watching it, and then they come down to get a part of it. So I think there's some things they need to work out there.
Yeah. Are they currently doing it?
They're not. They've been bouncing around the idea of...
Wow.
I mean, I think they might be doing it on one or two, but they're not. They haven't done it full scale.
Hey, to say, what a great way to raise money for the PBA, subscription based. I mean, think about it. People would
listen. It's an interesting job. I'll be honest with you. It on an everyday basis. Sometimes I sit and I think back to the regular things that are regular every day for us that you would sit and just marvel at. So it's an interesting job. I don't know that it needs to be shared 24/7 like that. But
since Scanner came up, let me ask you this: Scanner used to be, like in the newsroom, you'd have a little device, and people can monitor at home. Right now, there's like a digital app where you can listen to a scanner. But do you guys even use the technology you use? Has it changed? Are there certain times where you go on a quote, for lack of a better term, a different line, so the public with a scanner or these apps that are out there, so that they can't hear what's going on in the conversation?
All right, so not to get too far into the weeds for people because I don't want to bore them, but a few years back we went to a digital technology. So it's not that analog. We usually actually have, when I came on the job for probably my first 5 or 6 years of the job, we had a radio signal for the police department with an antenna on the roof, and we broadcast live.
Yeah, we pick it up on our scanners. And,
KEA 784, I'll never forget it for the rest of my life. That was Channel 1, and it was a huge tower on the roof, and it's actually the tower's still there. And we broadcast that out, and anybody with a scanner could pick that up.
Yeah.
Well, we went to digital, and when we did that, the actual signal changed. It encrypted it slightly, but you needed a digital scanner to pick that up. There are channels within the police department that are encrypted channels for a reason, because there are some things that just should not go out.
And you hear it every once in a while. Go over to channel such and such,
right?
Or
there's I think 10 or 12 channels total,
or
but usually
I'll
4 or 5
call you.
maybe.
I've heard on the scanner. I'll call you on the landline, or well, we don't really do that anymore, but. That sort of thing where somebody would actually make a phone call.
Right. Well, hey, listen, when I came on, we used to have a calling card code. We used to have to go to payphones when they still existed. For young kids, those are things you used to be able to put orders in.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
And dimes, actually.
Yeah.
Bill was a penny, I think. But, we actually had to go to payphones and call. It was pretty funny. Actually.
Now there are places where you take magic markers and you write sayings all over them, and they just sit there with a little roof on top. It's crazy. When you see one, it's like there is one up in
Look at that graffiti
it's like seeing Bigfoot.
It's crazy. Moffitt's Beach still has the old, up in Speculator, still has the old phone booth there.
No kidding.
And I tried to put a quarter in it, but I'm sure that's how the little gift shop there
came up
makes
3
money.
lemons.
Yeah, nothing comes out.
So how about this app that I've gotten? Jeff had kind of alluded to this. It's just amazing what you can do with it. I could search. I was listening to police forces in Russia, Germany, Australia. And it's
like you could
so
listen to
interesting,
like Chicago, which there's murders there all the time,
Sure,
and you can. Yeah, I just find it interesting.
They've got top 100. Chicago police is number 1.
That because of different situations that could pop up, a bank robbery, you have a hostage situation, you can't be broadcasting. I mean, the guy with a hostage situation could be on his app and say, okay, now they're going to the roof. Now they're going to the front. So I understand you need secure channels. I just wondered how that had changed.
It's funny, that app, because I'll get Dave, our friend Dave Rodriguez will call me. I got to tell you, there's a big hostage situation going on. I'm like, oh, okay, quickly. Where? Yeah, it's in Miami, and you're not going to believe this whole thing. Like, Dave, I don't care about what's going on in Miami.
Well, one of the problems when you kind of a separate topic, but one of the things you talk about with radio signals is all of us, local law enforcement, all use different channels. We don't have a metro channel, if you will.
Okay.
So what happens is you get a big incident, a multiple agency incident like UC. We can't speak to each other. Oh. So we dispatch through the county. Now, there is a channel. It's an interagency channel. But the problem is it's one channel, and if you have all those agencies sort of flowing into one, and
everybody's talking at the same time,
right? And it's not monitored by dispatch, so it's literally just person to person sort of thing. So there's been a lot of talk for years about creating a channel in which to speak to each other, because you get these big This happened down in New York City with 9/11.
Yeah.
Police and fire don't share a radio signal, and when many people remember when 9/11 happened, the repeater signal that they used. The tower they used was on the top of the building.
Right.
When the building came down, they lost all radio. So
oh my gosh.
all they could do was speak to each other, line of sight, like a walkie-talkie. In other words, I can see you, you can see me, I can talk to you. That's about it.
Wow. So your thoughts on is this going to become something that really happens, do you think?
I hope they move slowly.
We're talking about
on
body cams and social media, and basically watching this live TV, which would be real police action.
Yeah, I think I'm a big proponent of body cams, as you know, but I think they should move slowly when they're talking about broadcasting stuff live, unedited, without any sort of delay on it. I think that, in fact, the one incident that they had concern was a woman found out her son was killed watching it on live PD because
Oh, my
Yeah.
God.
she didn't know. Yeah, it was a drug deal or whatever it was, and he they showed his face, and she didn't know, and she was literally watching it. Her son died, which was horrible. Yeah.
And Bill, you raised the question. If there's a domestic situation,
there's
you're
some stuff you're
putting the victim right on TV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in some cases, these victims end up. You don't want the victim's name out
Right now in
ever, and then you could be dealing with age issues too. So
A lot of
there's
things.
stuff
Now
to
in
think
cops,
about.
of course, they do that, but they go through. And actually, one of the guys that's one of the producers on Cops is actually a very good friend of mine. I got to meet him. He lives in Texas, and they have a whole process of which they get releases to show these people. So if they can't. If you don't sign a release, they basically, unless it's a big
You get
thing,
blurred.
they don't show you. Right.
Yeah, that's why you see certain things being blurred out.
Now,
If
they
can't
blur
get the
you or
release.
they cut you right out.
Depends
of
on what the story is.
Okay.
If it's something significant, then they would blur your face. If it's something that's
not
no big
worth
deal, they just-
going through and
Exactly.
just cuts you out. So,
Yep.
all right, Steve, very interesting. I'm glad you caught this story. This is a biggie.